Well, good morning, everybody. This is the last day of ESIP. I have to say, I am so pleased to see so many people in the room on a Friday. So yay for sticking it out to the bitter end, everybody. Really, thank you for being here. So for those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Pamela Collins. I am the Senior Advisor for Interagency and International Affairs in the Earth Sciences Division at NASA headquarters, based out of Washington, D.C. And I will be moderating this morning's panel presentation and discussion. Great. So I'd like to start by welcoming our speakers and thanking them for being here today. You will be hearing from Katie Matthews, Tim Stryker, and Katie Baines from NOAA, USGS, and NASA. And I swear I fixed that orientation on the bottom right there before I put this deck up, so apologies for that. But you'll be hearing from them about the Global Group on Earth Observations, the US Group on Earth Observations, the Committee on Earth Observations Satellites, and some agency news from NASA and USGS. Then we'll go to a moderated panel discussion followed by audience questions. Well, we may even just skip straight to the audience questions and skip the panel discussion since there's so many of you all here. I want to make sure we get to what you need. We do have a Slido set up for collecting questions from the audience. So if you think of a question at any point throughout anybody's talk, go ahead and throw it in there and we can pull from those when we get to the discussion part of the session. This QR code will also come back again at the end. So if you don't get it now, don't worry about it. You'll have another chance. I just wanted to say a few things by way of introduction before we dive into the main event. Basically, just to orient you, since GEO may be a new acronym for some in this room, I just kind of wanted to orient you to what we're talking about. So there is a global group on Earth observations, a US group on Earth observations, and then a regional Americas group on Earth observations. They are sort of organized by geography from small to large. Each sort of does its own thing, but they also interact with one another. And while we're going to focus primarily on USGEO, GEO, and agency contributions within the US context today, I just wanted you to know that this larger ecosystem of nested organizations exists, and that there are also other regional GEOs as well beyond the Americas. There are many other countries that have their own domestic GEO beyond the US having theirs. And this whole ecosystem started to get set up in 2005. So it's had about 20 or so years to start to build in terms of missions, objectives, relationships, activities. So just by way of scene setting, that's the kind of ecosystem that we're entering into for today's conversation. Make sure I said everything I wanted to say. One other thing I'm going to say real quick before we get into the main event is just one flagship activity that USGEO is really excited about coming up soon. Is we will be, I say we because that's something that I help support. We will be releasing a US National Plan for Civil Earth Observations that'll be coming out in August. And it is the third in a series of these. The first one came out in 2014, and each one sort of builds on the previous one to talk about, what are US objectives for how we work with, how we leverage, what we use Earth observations for. There's a few principles that guided the plan's development. Don't really need to get into those, but if you want, please feel free to read this slide on your own. All of the decks should be accessible. I'm not sure how. Susan, you'll have to tell me how people can get the decks. The last thing that I will say is that these are the priorities that were listed out in the National Plan for Civil Earth Observations that we will be releasing in August. So it's broadly organized around the three thematic areas of climate, environment, and human health and safety. And then there are a lot of different sort of cross-cutting activities that are important regardless of the thematic topic that you're considering. And so that's really all I have to say. I just wanted you all to know that this was coming out. Keep an eye out for it. It'll go up on the USGEO website, hopefully in August. That's usgeo.gov. What I'm going to do now is take this deck down and put up the deck of our first speaker, Katie Matthews. And remember, be thinking of questions. Here's that Slido QR code once again. You will see this again at the end of the session. All right, so help me out here. Thanks, guys.
Perfect. I'm hard of hearing, and so I always like to do especially because I'm shorter than this microphone, do a quick sound check. Looking at people in the back, looking at people on Zoom. Hopefully they can hear okay. Hopefully you're not overly looking at my chin. I hear that's a problem this week. I really want to thank Pam for organizing this session. I am excited to be back in Asheville. Some of you know that I spent 12 years working here in Asheville at NCI, and as more of a kind of policy, communications, international affairs type versus a scientist, it really was my time at NCI that taught me about no matter how amazing an observation platform is, the true value in that platform really lies in what we do with the data. It lies in, do people actually want the information that that data provides? And how do we make that data accessible and in an equitable manner? And then how do we sustain that equity of access to information over time? I left Asheville and did something that nobody does, which is move back to the DC Beltway, only because I had the opportunity to work on these issues at a global scale through groups such as the Committee on Earth Observation Satellite, which my colleague Tim Stryker from USGS will talk about later, and then also the Group on Earth Observations, which is what I want to talk to you about today. So first of all, why is there an organization such as GEO? I'm going to call it GEO instead of saying Group on Earth Observations every time. That seems obnoxious. So when I say GEO, that's what I mean. Our planet really does face environmental challenges that don't stop at borders. They're either geographic or institutional or disciplinary. And so the UN Development Program, or UNDP, has named this a kind of triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity, and pollution. And that those in particular lead to the land degradation, deforestation, and environmental disasters that we see around the world. There's a report on this called Stockholm Plus 50, a global synthesis of national consultations, if you want to read more about this. While these challenges are obviously interconnected, that's why we're all here, that's why we all work in this field, the global response in many ways remains fragmented. Some folks are working on climate, some folks are working on disasters. And so in addition to that, there's a great increase in an ever-growing flood of information and data sources to help meet this triple planetary crisis. And so, but there's this, again, then we still have this gap in what those cohesive global partnerships are. And so that is where GEO steps in, trying to make sure I can see all my notes, in really striving to kind of provide at least one place where there is unifying some of these fragmented efforts and trying to seek some of these holistic solutions to these challenges. Okay, who in here, first question to everybody, who in here has worked on a GEO-related activity or actually even knows what GEO is when I say this? Okay, so we've got I'm preaching a little bit to the choir. That makes me very, very happy. I'm gonna give a quick cliff notes for those that may be a little less familiar. GEO promotes open, equitable access to Earth observation information to really help decision makers understand and act on a global challenge. If you've ever worked with a policymaker, $10, they're not a scientist. $10, they're not necessarily, they're working on 16,000 items. And this is only one little issue that they are dealing with in the full spectrum of their work. And so presenting this information in a way that they can understand and make decisions in a really quick manner is really important. And so just a quick bit of history, GEO was founded in 2005. That first decade was really focused on data access. How do we access data when we got on-prem data here and on-prem data here? Then the next decade became more, okay, we kind of worked through some of that issue. And then the next decade really became about data services because it was no longer about just the data, it was about the services and information products that you're providing. This next decade, we have a new post-2025 strategy that's about to be implemented, and its focus is on creating Earth intelligence to meet these global needs for knowledge-based decision-making. Sorry, this like moved quickly. Okay, GEO is an intergovernmental organization, which means it's run by member states, but its unique strength is that it really engages the transdisciplinary and multi-sectoral and really the kind of global community. This inclusive concept then allows us to draw on not just governments, but UN agencies, regional agencies, non-for-profit organizations, the private sector, and academia. And this, being able to draw on this interdisciplinary pool of expertise really is, in my mind, what really is the value that GEO can provide. A lot of that value you see comes from the GEO work program. I'm hoping some of those raised hands means you're involved in a work program activity. There are 40 plus activities in GEO at the moment that represent best efforts collaborations across GEO sectors to create products and services that are targeted at regional and global needs. We're not going to actually talk about AmeriGeo all that much today, but I did want to mention that we do have this regional focus called AmeriGeo, which represents the Western Hemisphere, and we have a very active community focused on these same issues that I'm talking about at the GEO, but really on the regional manner. And there's a lot of people in the room who put a lot of time and energy into helping to make sure that what's happening on the global level is also able to be adapted and used in the Western Hemisphere. So what is Earth intelligence? So I've been getting a lot of comments and questions about this over the last year. So this was adopted in November of 2023, where we endorsed this new GEO post-2025 strategy called Earth Intelligence for All. And it is really this vision that focuses on strengthening collaboration, enhancing data accessibility and interoperability, and also promoting the integration of Earth observations and social science in particular, and that social science derived knowledge to make for evidence-based decision-making. So a lot of the things you would think about, it's really rooted in how, user needs. There's a lot of talk about collective knowledge and knowledge from, say, citizen science, indigenous communities, social science, other types of observations, in addition to Earth observations, and then combining it with that scientific backbone of modeling, prediction, and scenario analysis. And so it goes beyond just the provision of products and services and really digs into what is the information people need, when do they need it, in what format can it be accessed, and that they can afford, and will the information actually be used? And so that's where I think we're going in this next decade. We have a couple of activities that are already ongoing that are kind of progressing this idea of Earth intelligence and its potential to respond to user need and support decision-making. There are two activities are the Global Ecosystem Atlas. Our friends at USGS are extremely engaged in the kind of initial development at that, and the Global Heat Resilience Service, where NOAA and NASA are playing a key role in the kind of design, helping to design that. And these are some experimental examples by GEO to really co-design demand-driven integrated solutions. So the Global Ecosystem Atlas aims, and again, these are kind of in their nascent stages, so these aren't complete activities yet. The Global Ecosystem Atlas aims to be that comprehensive online resource aiming to integrate high-resolution ecosystem maps at the global, regional, and national levels, and enabling stakeholders then to take action to protect their own ecosystems and biodiversity. It's designed to support monitoring and reporting under multilateral environmental agreements, which is a big deal at the policymaker level, again, as a way to help engage with policymakers, and also offering near real-time views of the global ecosystem. Oops, sorry. The Global Heat Resilience Service is a co-designed service that will provide every urban area of the world with data and knowledge on the health risks from exposure to extreme heat. I know we know a lot about that here in the US from this summer, especially depending on where you live. But these insights are going to help cities around the world develop plans to adapt to heat and reduce the impact on citizens' health and local economies. We all know how heat is one of the greatest kind of threats to human health. Okay, so why do we work on GEO activities? I just have two examples. There are probably many other examples, and we can hear, I'd love to hear from people in the room about their value and what in their activity. If you have some stories about how your work program activity that you're working on is providing value in terms of that potentially economic or social science impact, I'd love to hear more about it. So one example of this is GeoGLOS, or GEO's Global Water Sustainability. And this is, again, a very good example of that value proposition of GEO. It's kind of created by NOAA with funding from NASA and the State Department, partnering with the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting for the modeling, partnering with academia in the form of the Brigham Young University for the science development and application development, and working with the private sector, such as Amazon Web Services, to get cloud credits for various countries around the world. And it creates this reliable 15-day ensemble forecast and 80 years of historical simulated streamflow data for every river of the 7 million river networks worldwide. And in many cases where there aren't in situ observations, is providing actionable information where there little or none exists. And in places where there is in situ information, countries are able to work with GeoGlobes to combine their in situ networks with this satellite-based network, this modeling system, in order to even better provide more accurate information for their country. Keep hitting the wrong thing. Just as an example, you see in the value during Hurricanes Eta and Iota in November 2020, the Honduran State Power Company was able to use GeoGlobes to discharge, its forecasting to discharge, I think it was like 2 million cubic meters of water from a reservoir before Iota's arrival, and that created flood storage kind of in between the storms and helped avoid loss of power and loss of lives, especially in the valley during the storm. The Sulu Valley next to that reservoir represents over 65% of the GDP of Honduras, and 50% of Honduras' exports. And so compared to those two storms, compared to Hurricane Mitch in 1998, the losses from the storms was 30% less. I mean, think about that. That's a huge number when you think about the amount of the GDP and the exports as well. Another activity is GeoGlam, the Global Agricultural Monitoring, that's really focused on improving food security. Again, a very effective cross-sectoral collaboration, and really aims to increase market transparency and improve food security by providing that relevant, timely information on agricultural conditions and production outlooks at both a national, regional, and local scale, or global scale. So one example here is where the World Bank worked with the Ugandan Office of the Prime Minister and the GeoGlam partners to develop a system that could predict in Uganda crop failure several months in advance and unlock disaster risk financing for vulnerable farming communities. That disaster risk financing helped 90,000 households, and they estimate between 2017 and 2020 that early financing release saved the government $11 million in reactive food aid costs. So these are two examples of where proactive work saved billions of dollars on the far end of that activity. Okay, so how do you get involved? If you're not just involved in the work program, there is a data knowledge and working group under GEO. This is really obviously working on the kind of how do you increase that uptake of Earth observations and promote the global adoption of data sharing and management principles like care and fair that we've heard a lot about this week. There are several subgroups, including a data sharing and management one, an in-situ data one, an ethics one, which I think is really important to this community, and also a law policy. I've heard a lot about data licensing, and the law and policy subgroup released some best practices related to common creative licensing for all data this past year. So that's another document to check out. If you are part of the US government and you would like to get more involved in this working group and are not already, please see me. If you are not part of the US government and would like to get more involved in something like this, I have put a point of contact in here at the GEO Secretariat so that you can contact them directly as well to see where you might want to get more involved. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about this, and there might even be a member or two in the room who are on this data working group. Yep, I see a hand, I see some hands. So we can talk about that more, and they will probably have more information, better information than me. Really quickly, how am I doing for time? Any thoughts? I'm just gonna keep going. So I want to focus just very briefly, this is my last real slide, on this post-2025 strategy. It really is, in my mind, one of the biggest evolutions of GEO yet. Again, because we're combining, and as a social scientist myself, combining kind of more hard science, this Earth observation information products with more social science really is exciting to understand. I always use this example of I'm not a scientist, so going to read a weather forecast sometimes from my own agency, NOAA, especially if you read the detailed weather forecast information, like, I can't understand that. The number of acronyms in those write-ups sometimes is like crazy. I don't understand that as a lay person. So what do I have to do? I have to use WeatherBug, because it gives me what I need, which is hour-by-hour forecasts, which NOAA doesn't and can't by law provide. And so to get the information that I need to make decisions, I have to use a different application. So I use that as just an example as a layperson of how do we go that last mile in many cases in the global context to make sure that people can use that information. And I think that this idea of Earth intelligence tries to move in that direction. You can see some of the goals for action here, creating more transformative programs, such as the ones we've talked about a little bit, increasing global equity. I think that is really one of the premises of GEO to begin with, and as gaining stronger. We don't want to lose our innovative aspect and create, the integration of new technology. We do want to increase the participation of youth. We hear a lot in particular there's kind of two issues. One is in places like Africa, they have so many people who are interested in training and interested in using that training to create jobs. And they have an incredibly large youth population that is interested in kind of engaging in these types of activities. Then you have other things. If you look at, for example, small island developing states, they don't have as many people, and part of their aspect is trying to keep people and how do they leverage limited personnel resources. And so this is where integrating and investing in the participation of youth in these types of activities is really important. And then, of course, kind of related to how do we invest in all of these activities? How do we grow the resources that are available in order to meet the needs and the development of all these work program activities? Just a couple quick things on top of that I wanted to mention. If you are involved in a work program activity, the work program is going to be coming up with a call in September. The work program is really changing in relation to this strategy now, and it's really the first pillar of implementation of the GEO strategy, the new GEO post-2025 strategy that's moving out. The strategy itself calls for greater prioritization of the GEO work program, a greater focus on inclusivity and delivering actionable information and services. And so the GEO Program Board has created a framework for this that's going to be more integrated, more user-oriented, and will have monitoring and evaluation criteria. So again, that call for proposals is expected to launch in September. You can reach out to me if you have questions. And then one other thing I think of interest to this community is that there is an AI subgroup that's being developed. There isn't a lot of information yet, but again, if you are interested in learning more about that, see me. I can, once there's a bit more detail, we can make sure to spread that information out. And that's it. I've got a resource page here. Feel free to get involved. I think the work program is one way, the working group and other activities that I've talked about. And really, if you are, Tim Stryker is going to talk about USGEO, but if you're in the US government, there is an international activities working group under USGEO, and that is another place to learn more about the US government involvement in the various work program activities and the international aspects. So that's my spiel, and I'm going to let Tim Stryker up next.
It's like the final curation on my presentation here. No problem. That's great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Colette. Thank you very much, Pamela, for the invitation here. It's a tremendous honor to be here on a panel with Katie Matthews and Katie Baines in front of you all here on a Friday, high energy Friday morning. I can see with so many people here. Thank you very much for coming out. My name is Tim Stryker, and I work at U.S. Geological Survey in the National Land Imaging Program. And I'm here to share some of USGS's perspectives on our programs and partnerships, what we can do in partnership with you, and what you can do in partnership with us and with USGEO and with CEOS. And Katie did a great job covering international GEO and the connections between USGEO and international GEO, so I won't dwell on that. But ultimately, I'd like you to come away with some enthusiasm for a sense of enthusiasm and a sense of opportunity on how you can engage with us, both at a USGS agency level, with other federal agencies in USGEO and in CEOS, to help us all with this tremendously complex challenge we have of Earth intelligence and information for sustainable development, economic development, equity, and justice in our country and worldwide. So very briefly, an overview here of USGS. Our work is organized around these 5 thematic mission areas: water resources, natural hazards, energy and minerals, and ecosystems. Core science systems is where our program sits, which is the center within USGS for all of our Earth observations, remote sensing, geospatial, mapping data and information, and compute technology. More broadly, beyond just the 5 mission areas, Katie had mentioned earlier this kind of interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary approach to Earth science, and I would say this is a much richer characterization of our work at USGS and the expertise of our employees. A little more traditionally on the left-hand side in terms of the skill sets, but also working in partnership with other agencies and other external partners and the science disciplines on the right, and the bridging area there in the middle, in the green, to kind of help bridge this gap. Trying not to do our science in silos, but really kind of a holistic, Earth systems focused capability to research and monitor and ultimately to kind of predict Earth system phenomena for societal benefit. I also do want to acknowledge the very important role and importance of attention to traditionally underrepresented communities, indigenous communities, other traditionally less represented groups, in terms of that knowledge and information being combined with USGS knowledge and information. So we have a much better sense, the full sense of the importance of environmental information for all citizens, especially ones that have been traditionally disadvantaged in the past. So anyways, again, since I'm at USGS and we manage the Landsat mission, I just wanted to say a brief word about Landsat today and in the future. Due to its ability of supporting such a broad range of Earth science activities in the USGS and externally. It's the longest continuously operated Earth observation system, land imaging system, global, highly calibrated science quality data. Often called we call it the Swiss Army knife of satellite systems because of its many uses for ecosystems, natural resources, water resources, all types of land use, land cover change applications where we all live and work. But what we're most excited about is our partnership with NASA on the Landsat Next mission. And if you've come through the vestibule, the lobby area back there, you may have seen the pop-up stand we have. We're very excited about this mission because of the extensive work that had been done in user needs assessment, documentation from USGS, just tremendous systems engineering by our NASA partners. And so this mission will be a quantum leap forward in terms of operational land imaging capability with much higher spatial resolution, greater revisit frequency, and much higher spectral imaging capability to not only help us better monitor and assess the traditional applications, but moving into new areas for crop health, water quality, coastal ecosystems management, snow hydrology, soil mapping, kind of the whole range of land surface applications. And so things are moving along well with that. Our project teams are doing great collaboration, and NASA just awarded the instrument contract for this mission, a constellation of 3 triplets operating in orbit in tandem in June 2024. So this slide illustrates a cross-section of our most important external partnerships, not all inclusive, but hopefully a pretty good snapshot. You know, as a relatively small Earth observation agency, USGS needs to leverage capabilities, expertise, funding, and advocacy skills of our many external partners, interagency, international, commercial, and non-governmental, not-for-profit organizations. So these are many of our key partners in enabling continued, improved, freely available Landsat and other land remote sensing observations to all of our users. And for today, I'd like to focus briefly on USGEO and CEOS and the roles that they play, and hopefully how you could get involved or get connected with the work we're doing through those organizations. So here's what USGEO is and what USGEO does. Three primary functions are listed here across the slide in terms of coordination, planning, and assessment, improved Earth systems data management, and external coordination, both nationally and internationally. Again, Katie mentioned how USGEO is connected with and how US agencies have long been involved in international GEO and its work program and its priorities. So I won't dwell on that, but I would like to say a few words about, in particular, USGEO's assessment working group and data management working group activities. But beyond that, as Pamela had mentioned earlier, there is a new national plan coming out for you that was developed by USGEO, and White House and agency leadership contributing to that. So please be on the lookout for that. It's a very timely and very important document for all of us in moving forward. So the assessment working group of USGEO has long helped US agencies and White House offices to better understand the impact of the thousands of Earth observation systems and surveys that go into federal government programs for research, monitoring, and management of kind of Earth system phenomena. And so these are, this is everything from stream gauges to satellites to field work, to other sensors, much more than just operated by the US government. They can be external partners, international organizations, academic institutions, and others. And so these are kind of viewed across 13 thematic areas or societal benefit areas. And prior assessments from 2012 and 2016 helped agency leadership kind of better understand and manage our Earth observing systems portfolio, where to place resources and emphasis in the future going forward. And just recently, USGEO has released a 2023 assessment of the agriculture and forestry societal benefit area. And you can actually find that on the USGEO website. If you want to delve more into the details, you can also get a copy of my presentation. I've got lots of background information on kind of the peer-reviewed process and the findings of that assessment, which we're very enthused about. We're pleased to see Landsat get top marks once again for impact, along with many other data sources that that USGS provides. Again, field work, elevation data, topographic maps, and others. Lots of other sources and high impact data sets there that you can look at as well. Particularly for you all in the ESIP community, though, I would like to focus more on USGEO's data management and then CEOS's data management activities in the following slide. This is the USGEO Data Management Working Group, and you can see the goals of the group here, which I would say are very closely aligned with the ESIP community. I think what's great about this particular group, and some of the involvement I've had in the past with it, and what I see going on today, is its focus on kind of this last mile of data awareness, accessibility, access, and usability, which I guess in my opinion, perhaps in yours also, is probably the most important part of this entire Earth observation information ecosystem. Getting that to the users and letting the users do all their wonderful work with the data itself. So, and I think the work plan, or I'm sorry, the working group really exhibits a lot of the same characteristics that I've experienced in attending ESIP meetings, which again is just kind of a very mission-focused, kind of pragmatic perspective on data, eager to cross agency boundaries and just kind of roll up our sleeves and get involved, make things work better for the greater good, without any individual, personal, or agency glory, just again for the good of the user community writ large. And so the history of this working group includes issuance of the Common Framework for Earth Observations, which I think was quite an important step in terms of putting forward kind of a more holistic, non-agency specific, kind of user-focused practices for data management and data usage. But now the working group is focused on an Earth observation data management in the cloud policy. And this is where you come in. So I think it would be wonderful for you all to let us know in federal agencies, what a Earth observation in the cloud policy can and should be. I mean, if not you, who else would be best placed to kind of advise federal agencies on this? So please reach out to our co-chair colleagues at NASA and USGS, Dana Ostrenga or Tom Sori. If you're not in a federal agency, they'd still love to get your perspective, and through user interfaces such as ESIP. If you are a federal employee or a federal contractor, you could get even more directly involved, and we could use your expertise and your perspective. So I'd like to speak briefly now also a little bit about CEOS, or the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites. How many of you have heard of CEOS? Raise your hand. Okay, well that's good. So anyway, CEOS is very much focused, I would say, at kind of an international level for satellite Earth observations, much in the same way that USGEO has focused at the national interagency level for satellite remote sensing. And it's part of a much bigger, again, information ecosystem, tremendous importance of in situ measurements and non-satellite measurements. But I found it to be a really kind of wide-ranging, influential and beneficial group in terms of better aligning all CEOS member agencies, multiple Earth observations, missions, and their data, and helping all of us, not only NASA, NOAA, and USGS, who've been involved all across the CEOS program and organization for many years, but many other civil Earth observation space agencies around the world to better coordinate global observing support to key international treaties and programs of the United Nations, the GEO work program, other important international organizations and activities. CEOS is a best efforts voluntary coordination group, but it has 40 years of experience and traction, and as my colleague Dave Borges, sitting toward the back of the CEOS Systems Engineering Office by NASA, I think will also confirm, there's a lot of really good, really substantive, committed work activities going on within CEOS. And within CEOS in particular, I'd like to focus a little bit more on the working group on information systems and services. So again, I see this embodying the same objectives on an international level that I think the ESIP community is so concerned about. And for this reason, NASA, NOAA, and USGS have long been involved. And again, this is a place where we can benefit from your expertise and support. So while at the plenary level, the meetings are reserved for member agencies, CEOS working groups can and often do involve other participants, other collaborators outside of the kind of strict agency membership criteria of CEOS itself. So your voice can be very helpful in advancing kind of the WGES vision you see here in terms of better accessibility, improved information and product exchange, best practices for interoperability, and advancing complementarity, interoperability, and standardization of services. So my USGS colleague, Tom Sori, I'll use his name in vain once again, but I'll also use Katie Baines' name here because she's his co-chair, or kind of not co-chair, I'm sorry. You're the NASA representative to the working group. Tom is currently the chair of the working group, and Tom, Katie, Ken Casey, if he's around, I'm sure they'd love to hear your perspective and input in the work plan going forward. So a couple initiatives that are related to WGES but also involve other CEOS folks are the CEOS Analysis Ready Data Framework, with the objective of reducing the time and effort of users in ingesting and using Earth observations data for their specific applications, and improving the efficiency of multi-source information products through more compatible formats and specifications. You can see the approach here in terms of product definitions, specifications, and the assessment process. Agencies, companies can get involved, can work with CEOS on the analysis-ready data certification for the remote sensing data and products. CEOS has already done this for many data sets and information products already. And so once again, Tom, Katie, and Ken are the people to talk with in this area. Interoperability, another very, very important concept, which you have been working on for many years also in the ESIP community. It's kind of the holy grail for those of us involved in Earth observations, and making it much easier for disparate data sets, remote sensing, geospatial, other types of data and information to become more connected, more interoperable, more usable on kind of a holistic basis for transdisciplinary Earth system science. And so WGES has been involved in supporting this. My colleague Tom, once again, quite active in the framework. And you can see the 5 topics that have been identified here as critical factors for interoperability: semantics, architecture, accessibility, quality, and policy. And each of those has several components. As you know, probably much better than I, there's a lot of detail, a lot of challenges involved in bringing all this together. And again, that's where the expertise of our ESIP community can come in handy. So with that, just like to reemphasize in closing points that USGS is eager to partner with all of you in new ways for making our Earth observations data more accessible, discoverable, and usable. U.S. agencies need your expertise and your support to advance these same objectives for all U.S. Earth observations data, public and commercial, through groups like USGEO. And you can collaborate not only with us on a national basis, but get involved internationally through CEOS working groups that seek to advance these principles on a global scale. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much, and look forward to questions and connecting perhaps with many of you after the session. Thank you.
Good morning. Insert obligatory comment about how many people are here on a Friday morning. My name is Katie Baines. I am the Earth Data Officer. This position was formerly known as the Program Executive for Earth Science Data Systems. I am working within NASA headquarters. I've been in this position for a little less than a year now, but the title of Earth Data Officer actually didn't exist before last August, and I think it's an indication of the level within NASA of elevation that we've seen as a program over the last decade. So I think that, and that's due in no small part to the sort of collaborations and partnerships we've made here. I'm just going to be upfront. I learned probably more about GEO today than I ever knew before the start of this session. So I really do appreciate the opportunity to listen to Katie and Tim talk about both the international activities and the ones happening closer to home. That being said, I do find that there's a lot of things that we are already, well, obviously we're already engaged in. I need to talk to Dana Estrenga a lot more. She probably would be the better person to give this talk, so props to Dana. But this talk today, you're going to see is much more focused on NASA, and I've been trying, as I listen to the speakers, to tie what we're doing within the NASA Earth Science Division to what is going on at a larger global scale. And I got to be honest, it was pretty easy to do, which is heartening to me. If you don't know much about the Earth Science Division, prepare for a little whirlwind tour of what we're doing at NASA, and then I will do my best to sort of explain where I'd like to see our program go within data systems and how I see ties to organizations like USGEO, GEO, and CEOS going forward. And as I said, I haven't been in this position very long, and I actually didn't even know I was coming to this meeting until fairly recently, and even more recently, that would be presenting on this panel. So if it seems a little brief and underprepared, that's fine. Or I'm telling myself that's fine, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So going forward, so just a brief whirlwind tour. This is the most recent, and you'll notice you can always, if you see one of these fleet charts, you can always see how recent this has been put together. This one's from July 11th, so it's actually the latest and greatest. And it is really, it's color coded and actually symbolically coded to show where we are with our Earth observing fleet at NASA. This does not include the suborbital or field campaigns, which make up a large part of what we do as well. Yeah, props to the ORNL, who does a lot of airborne and in-situ data archive and dissemination. But there's literally dozens of these. So let's see. The purple ones are the ones that are still in early formulation, and the color coding really kind of indicates where we are in the life cycle plan. So basically, I think maybe this week one of these purple ones has turned. It's been split into two different satellites, and one of them's orange and one of them's purple. So it's like there's a lot of information embedded in this. We have not only free flying, but we have partnerships and elements along aboard the ISS. So just we got a lot of data. It's a full-time job to just push the paper around to make sure that these data get where they ought to be, and I rely on literally the work of hundreds of people to actually do the work. So if you're in that community, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. You make us look good. So just a little bit more context about the Earth Science Division itself. I would say that a couple of years ago, this puzzle piece that is listed as data and compute wasn't really at this same level, as I mentioned. My title has actually been kind of elevated in the recent years. But we really do have sort of 5 main elements. We're led by Karen St. Germain, or Dr. Karen St. Germain and Dr. Julie Robinson, and they are a leadership team that oversees 5 major program elements and a budget of over $2 billion a year, of which data is not an insignificant part. We comprise about 1/6, I think, of the overall Earth Science Division budget. But we're only a small part of what is going on within the Earth Science Division. So we do in technology investments. If you're looking at who's looking at quantum or new technologies in digital twins and AI ML modeling that is sort of low TRL, high risk, high reward sort of things, you want to look at our technologies portfolio, the ESTO program, or Science Technology Office. The folks who build all of the birds and make sure that they fly on schedule and within budget. That's the flight program. Obviously, the research and analysis is where a lot of our both directed and competed grants go through. I'm in data and compute, and Earth Action is our newest sort of 5th element. It was formerly known as Applied Sciences. But the rebranding or the sort of indication of has, and that's Hail Marrying on the slide, but it's really emphasized what we are focusing on and with respect to actionable. And this is very much aligned with what I heard Katie talk about in her talk. So just a tour of that. Oh, wrong direction. And we do collaborate at many levels. I haven't gone through, this is absolutely not an exhaustive list. It was just a graphically designed and attractive to the eyes, but you'll see that both CIAS and GEO are on there, as well as the WMO. So we do partner across all sorts of international and national and federal agencies. I think we're not doing as well at the federal, at the state and local and tribal level. I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth there. But we're also engaging not just with government agencies, but also with industry and academia. And even more, I think there's an area for growth into the philanthropic and geospace. So this is sort of what we mean. And please don't take it personally if you don't see your particular logo and you have a relationship with NASA. But we do have a lot of ties to bind us to the community and beyond. And what I really wanted to spend a lot of the rest of my talk focusing on is the new strategy that's been rolled out at our by Karen St. Germain, our leadership within the Earth Science Division, and then really draw you a picture of what that means to the data systems component, or that puzzle piece. So what you have here is a visual depiction, and if you've been in the NASA Earth Science ecosystem for the last 6 months, you'll know that this has been really where we've been focusing a lot of our efforts in communicating to our community. So this is a picture of the Earth Science to Action strategy, which is really the new strategy for the Earth Science Division. Karen likes to say that we actually haven't had a strategy revamp in 20 years. And I'm not going to get these two objectives right, but at a high level, one of our objectives is to holistically monitor the Earth, and the other one is to inform decisions for action. So there's two goals. The second one is a new one for us, and we're really learning how we can take our data and information, and that's how we've been thinking about this, and translate it into knowledge. But we've been approaching it on a multi-level face, and a lot of people ask me, so are you guys just the foundation of the pyramid within data systems? And I would say that that is a large part of what we do, but it is by no means where we stop our touch. And Josh Blumenfeld in the back of the room, if you can raise your hand. You didn't know you were going to get a shout out, but he is really one of the sort of tips, one of our elements at the purple tip of the pyramid here. Up and down the entire thing, there's a role for data systems and information and knowledge sharing. And when we talk about public understanding and exchange, him and his team have been doing the yeoman's work of communicating and translating our science into things that are digestible by more than just what I affectionately call the data nerds. So we actually within data systems have a role all up and down this pyramid. And I try to communicate that to whenever I interact with my team or with folks outside of my team, that we are not just DAX. So we are more than just archives. We do an aid in applied research. We often work with programs like Unbound, which I cannot remember what that stands for, but it's basically user needs. Oh gosh. I know that the ND stands for NASA data, but we have been doing for the last couple of years, and we'll be continuing to do over the next 5 years, basically half education and half listening sessions, where we do thematic communities. We bring them together and try to listen to we tell them what we're doing, and then they tell us why that's bad for what they need, which is really helpful in a humbling way. So I hope that as you think of even the work that you do at your individual institution, you can sort of think about how we are trying to align with within our system, and how you might be doing the same even at the local, state, tribal, or even international level. So All right. So this week has been really fun, and a lot of people have been asking me how I'm doing or what I've been thinking about. And so I'll just sort of end my sort of talk with "and what else." So these are the sort of things, and I want to have these conversations with folks like Tim and Katie, and more internationally, because that is something I have not been doing, and I want to improve as I grow into this role. But I think some of these things are going to be things that are of concerns to lots of folks in the room, and they're specifically what are keeping me awake at night, and also what gets me excited to get up in the morning. So my lack of sleep is largely in part to this list of bulleted items. And what else? Additional context informing data system strategy, and what's changed. So many of you know, probably most of you know, that a lot of the work that we do is driven by a decadal survey, which is done once a decade. We're in our second cycle. We're about halfway through, and we just got a not so glowing, but not too terrible midterm review of how we've been doing to advance the decadal strategy. So a lot of things that I think about, at least, and there might be some recency bias in here, but this really is a large part of what I do, everything on this list, is thinking about how we place ourselves in the context of missions that are have been determined by the National Academy to address problems and scientific queries of our generation and hopefully the next 7. That's not in the report, but if you know, you know. So one of the really cool things about this, one of the crazy things about this is the budget pressures and the ever-increasing data volumes. But the other cool thing about this is that one of the things that we've been doing within the NASA Earth Science Division over the last couple of months is establishing this idea of a mission management team. So this is probably very in the weeds for most of you, but you have always had sort of a program executive that oversees the entire life cycle of a flight mission, from the concept of doing a flight through all of the stages of, like, is this a good idea? Is it technologically feasible? Is it affordable? All those questions we have to answer at multiple times during the life cycle. And it's been basically an Uber project manager who oversees this. What they haven't done in the past is engage the data systems folks to ask us questions about, is this data volume going to be appropriate? Are these data products going to be interoperable? Are they going to be performant in a cloud environment? How is it going to go with reprocessing? And are there ways to do data reduction? And can we do on-demand processing? And how can these products be designed to help new communities? We actually now have this idea of a mission management team within NASA that aids us in doing that now. So, and that's not just a voice at a DAC, which obviously the voices at the DACs actually know how to do these things on the ground. But my job and the job of my team at headquarters is to say, hey, I'm not going to approve of this review unless it's feasible, interoperable. I'm not trying affordable, and it's the right thing for our community. So I'm really excited by this, and I'm really excited to see how we can design data products of the future. And so I've been listening so closely to all these sessions about chunking and where you put the metadata in the file, and how do you do this in a cloud way. And I am excited to engage at the national and international level to share what we're learning and exploring and investing in beyond that. I'm also sort of excited and terrified of new technologies, and I'm not just talking about moving to the cloud or how we do utilize tools like ZAR and Kerchunk and all of those really obviously required things, but I'm thinking about the context of AI/ML, and I'm also thinking about how the things that we are being asked to do involved sort of predictive capabilities, which have been oh, am I late? I'm going to try to hurry up, but would have largely been, so in my job, we've been focused on observations. We haven't really been focused on predictive capabilities, nor has it ever been something we've been asked to do. But now, as we look at engaging with the digital twin frameworks that are coming out of our technology office and are coming out with our international partners, we have to think about making data products that not only are usable for observations, but usable for prediction or I'm sure I'm using the wrong words in this scenario, but insert the right word that I should be using, predictive capabilities or into that and making those accessible. We've also got a whole bunch of policies on open data, which I think are also influencing activities at the national, international level. I'm sure many of you are aware of TOPS, and hopefully you have taken the TOPS Open Science 101 training. It's really not that hard, and it really does open your eyes into the benefits of open science, the pitfalls of where you might run into problems, and how you actually do the thing. So I think I've already touched on existing and future partnerships and how I'm here to listen and learn and meet people and do the networking thing, which is really what ESIP shines at, I think, in my opinion, having these really down-to-earth, in-the-weeds discussions. I heard a colleague from Amazon say to me, like, I used to do, human, like things focused on global policy and humanitarian efforts. And he's like, these meetings actually are not full of like platitudes. They're full of like people with shovels and ready to do the work. So really exciting. And I think that it's going to enable us to broaden your user community and enable more science. So I know this is sort of a NASA style presentation, but everything I think I hear here at these meetings has been echoed in the work we're doing. So it's encouraging and heartening for me that we're doing the right things and meeting with the right people. And so I thank you for your time, and let's answer some questions.
So while we're getting our questions slide up on the screen, I want to invite Tim and Katie up to the front of the room. We'll be using this microphone for answering the questions. We'll mostly be handling questions via Slido. If anyone really wants to ask a question in the room, we have that option, but let's try to use Slido if we can. That is the right slide. Absolutely it is. And one thing I'd like to do quickly before we dive into your questions for this group is I have 2 questions for all of you because we want information exchange to flow both ways. We would love to know, so of everything that you've heard today, and maybe the way I've written this question isn't exactly how you want to formulate it, but from what you've heard today, we'd love to know what you're already connected with. If this was all totally brand new to you, or if you're already engaged in some of these activities. And then if there's anything you want us to know or think about where you need help, where something like what you've heard about today could be helpful, but there isn't a connection yet. And so the way this is going to work is I'm going to go to my other computer because this one doesn't like my Slido password for some reason, and I'm going to activate the poll for the first question. I'll give us a minute and I'll set the timer, and you'll hear my little radar thing go off again. So you'll have a minute to enter whatever answers you might have to that first question. We'll do another minute for the second question, and then we'll get to the main event, which is these 3 wonderful folks over here. So I will go ahead and press play on my computer. Let me know if it doesn't work for anything. Some of the audience Q&A questions for the group, and it looks like I don't have any of these addressed to a particular individual up here, so all of you are free to handle this however you'd like. And I am going to sort of mix and match a little bit. Or, you know what, would you like to choose which questions you'd like to answer? No.
Just ask a question, we'll figure it out.
All right.
We're gonna roll.
Okay.
We're gonna be agile.
So first question, in no particular order, just picking them kind of out of the hat here. How does or will commercial data acquisition figure into GEO, particularly given the circumstances where that data is behind a paywall?
Okay, cool. Let me start by saying at the GEO level, private sector is highly engaged. For example, I believe Planet is a associate member of GEO. So they're at the table where these things are engaged. I think one of the things that GEO is looking at, and it's involved in the strategy, is the idea that data from the, that the private sector has to both make money, but also wants to contribute to these global solutions. And so there's a lot of discussion around the idea that how does their open data, open does not necessarily mean free, how can the global community work together to get access to those types of data? I think there's various models out there that could look at. And one of the things that, to help enable that in the next year, that GEO is looking at is what sort of operating model does it need in order to put together, to be able to basically take money. It needs more of a legal standing in order to be able to get money from, say, philanthropic organizations, or to be able to set up, like, say, large data buy contracts from the private sector that could then be given to specific countries who are needing high resolution data, land imaging data in particular, which is a big thing that we hear from the global GEO community. So I think all these issues are on the table and actively being discussed, and I'm also happy to hear what others in the audience have to say.
Obviously NASA has a commercial small sat data acquisition program, and I don't know how much. And luckily Dana Ostrenga is actually now the project manager of that the CSDA program. But my comment is more about international collaboration, and I don't know whether this is applicable or not. So it's almost like I'm having a conversation with you, but they happen to be listening. One of the things that we've been doing is comparing notes with the European Space Agency on commercial small sat data acquisition. And actually we've come up, one of our bilateral activities, and some of you may have been hearing about the MAP project that's going on between ESA and NASA, because I think we had a whole session on it yesterday. But there's other things that we are collaborating with them on, and one of them is the evaluation of commercial small sat data products and their applicability to different types of use. So we've got 2 different evaluation frameworks that we've been developing bilaterally with ESA. I think one's on SAR data evaluation and one's on optical data evaluation. I wonder if those have been incorporated into, and it's more about the scientific applicability, not so much about the commercial company's engagement, but it might be something that would be of use to other folks, and I would encourage you to ask Dana about that. But so, yeah.
I appreciate the information.
Yeah.
So first off, I am going to say we have too many good questions and we cannot get to them all. So I apologize if you don't hear your question asked. One that I think I want to highlight next, given some of the focus of the past week, how does the GEO universe currently or plan to interact with tribal communities, either US or international? Anyone have a?
So again, I'm looking at the GEO level, not necessarily at the US level. So in international GEO, there has been historically activities. There's a GEO Indigenous Alliance, so it looks at specific needs from the indigenous communities around the world. And there is definitely an acknowledgement of the need to work with indigenous communities and how data is treated and information products are treated and how they're used, and how they are, so how that has worked with the community. I think one of the things that GEO wants to look at in the future, it isn't just like that there's a separate group over here, but it's how do we integrate that, thinking about citizen science, indigenous communities and their data needs as part of the process for each work program activity. So one thing, if you're working on a work program activity that you're going to reapply for, one thing I would challenge you on is also, like, how are you integrating and looking at indigenous communities and citizen science in the work proposal that you're going to put together for your next work program activity?
Yeah, I think that's a great answer that Katie gave, and I think from USGS or Department of Interior perspective, we're I think in complete alignment. There's a lot that we have learned, even in recent years, about the proper relationship and equities and collaboration with tribal communities or other or underrepresented groups in the United States. May or may not be specifically applicable to how that's done elsewhere in the world, but I think there is this good general sense and recognition, maybe moving past some of the old we're here to help kind of frameworks and into a much better understanding of the data information needs, where we can learn from each other, hopefully not just making the same old mistakes we made in the past in a new manner. But yeah, GEO is can be a very useful mechanism for this in terms of kind of, the global, indigenous communities and others, working together for this common goal.
So this next question I'm actually going to take because it sort of pertains to this session. The question was, should ESIP have a session like ESIP input to USGEO priorities? Would this be welcomed? Would this provide a good pathway for collaboration? So yes, 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 and yes. That was honestly part of what we were trying to do today, and we could absolutely do a better job of it in the future. So this is meant to be really supporting that kind of thing. I work very closely with USGEO. I get to talk with Susan Shingledecker for ESIP quite a lot, so there are some lines of communication there, and we definitely do want to broaden those. So absolutely yes. Come talk to me after if you have specific ideas for how we could continue to build on this. The next thing I'm going to do is combine two questions that are sort of NASA focused for Katie. One is thoughts on how NASA can continue to improve how it supports GEO, and if there's maybe anything we would consider doing differently, and that we could maybe tag team that. Yeah. And then the other question is also, and I think this is NASA specific, collecting information on addressing end user and DAC user experience. I don't know anything about that, so I'm going to punt that one to Katie, and then maybe we can tag team the broader one.
So you want me to answer my perspective on, so the best thing that NASA, or specifically the Data Systems Program, I think can do is have an educated leader. So my main goal is to learn more about the existing touch points and work with Dana at Estrenga. I've been doing this same thing as I joined the CIOS committee. I've been reaching out to the principals and learning more about what we're doing, what's working, what's not working. And I really wanted to engage at the same level with my GEO colleagues. Can you read the question again?
My screen just turned off.
Okay.
NASA,
This year?
yeah, that one.
What can NASA do differently to better support the various GEOs? What are examples of NASA activities that have been
Counterproductive to GEO. I can't answer what has been counterproductive, but I'm sure that there have been.
Areas for improvement.
Yeah, areas of improvement, I think.
And also end user experience, DAC end user experience.
Yeah. Okay, so we did about 9 or 10 years ago, we did a user experience evaluation where we redesigned the Earth data search client utilizing UI UX techniques. And I think we've been doing some usability studies sort of on an ad hoc, non-intentional basis. There are people in the audience who work with the ESDIS project who would know more about what we're doing on the ground and would be better poised to answer this question. But I will say that we do hold these unbound workshops. We actually held one on tribal food, energy, and water over the winter this year, ending in March. To sort of tell people what we do and then listen to what we can do better. I think that the individual DACs have plenty of user feedback via the forum and just interactions that they do over email support on how to better serve their users. But I wouldn't say that it's a large-scale strategic undertaking. We all are also undergoing a website unification activity where all of the DACs will be sort of moving into a nasa.gov space to sort of refocus the attention instead of having 12 different places that one might find, a more centralized location to help find data. That's also been an adjustment, but I think it's something that I want to look at more, how we're engaging usability and UI UX. We're especially doing this with new things that are focusing on new audiences, like the Greenhouse Gas Center. We're getting ready to undergo a redesign of that site to look at, maybe you come to this site and you don't want to see data catalog as the first thing. You want to see what should I worry about, or who am I, and how do you engage that specific type of stakeholder? So that's conversations that, as we're trying to broaden our community, we need to broaden our thought of what someone coming to our website is looking for.
I'm just going to add one supplementary comment to finish out this conversation, and then we've got questions queued up for Tim and Katie. So the last point that I'll make on the previous topic is that NASA is actually one of the co-chairs of USGEO, and NASA has pretty strong foundational representation at GEO. So we do have seats at those tables for basically all the big picture strategic conversations. So there's really good connectivity there. So if folks have ideas, you can approach us and we can inject those ideas into those conversations. Tim, you had your question. Did you just want to read it? Sure. Yeah, come on over.
So thank you, Alexei. For a question, before we had only a few expensive EO satellites from only big government agencies. Now we have cheap ones from many groups. How are we adapting to this? So I think that's a very good question. And what I'd like to emphasize is we don't see this as an either or kind of arrangement. There's a role to play for large satellites with multiple coincidence sensors, providing highly calibrated instrumentation, highly complex science information, as well as commercial systems that may be smaller, may be cheaper, may be faster to launch, but also can provide new insights in terms of greater frequency of coverage, and combining those two data sources together makes for a much more powerful, I think, information product and understanding. We do work, USGS and other agencies I know, NASA, NGA, USDA, work very closely with commercial small satellite firms through the Joint Agencies Commercial Imagery Evaluation Group. And there's a lot of learning and knowledge exchange going on there. And many of these new companies are actually calibrating their instruments, validating their data against the longer term data records from these larger, I would say, more complex science observatories that the federal agencies are operating. So, we're all learning the commercial data is improving. We're finding new uses for it. We are beneficiaries of the NGA and NRO commercial satellite data contracts and very flexible licensing parameters for any federal civil agency to take and use these data. So we're using commercial imagery and information all the time. But what's important is they can really reinforce one another rather than having to choose between one or the other. And perhaps Katie want to say more, I'm not sure.
This is more of a NASA-centric answer, but we do have small pockets of folks who are doing data fusion activities where they take sort of measurements that exist, and TROPES is actually a good example of this. I don't see the JPL folks in the room who are responsible, but it's taking ozone measurements from lots of different instruments and fusing them into a data product. I think that's going to be a lot more of some of the strategies. I personally call it like, the scrappiness. Maybe you don't have like a flagship mission that is launching and will serve all things to all people, but you have literally dozens of sort of measurements that you can sort of fuse together and do interpolation and create a product that helps you and drives things forward even without a sort of a flagship mission that's taking that measurement. And this is just what happens in a reduced sort of budget environment where the pressures are tight and you're decoupling and partnering and doing things that are more difficult. And I think as we learn how to do this in this constrained environment, we'll be sharing that in an open science manner. So.
And I would say NOAA is even doing that in its low Earth orbiting future planning. So there are two kind of questions related to GEO. One was in a poll and one was in the questions, but in the poll, the question was kind of the non-federal parts of ESIP have interest in international engagement, but it is not always obvious how to plug into GEO outside of the federal context. I would say a couple of things on that. There are different categories within GEO. There's the member states, and then there's participating organizations, which is UN, non-for-profit, regional organizations, and then there's the associate category, which is basically other, and that is, say, the private sector. Academia also is very engaged. They tend to be engaged via some of the working groups. They also tend to be engaged in many of the work program activities themselves. So I think there are a lot of different routes for the non-federal sector to engage overall in GEO activities. And I would need to know a little bit more specifics about the situation that you're talking about in order to kind of maybe provide some thoughts, further thoughts. And then one question kind of related to this, GEO also has many participating organizations, including ESIP. Is there or should there be some way for USGEO to coordinate and engage with US-based participating organizations? And the answer is there is. The US GEO International Activities Working Group, which again it holds a workshop on an annual basis. And this year it will be, we're working on mid-October, I think, and it will be likely at NASA headquarters. So more details to come, but what we do is email out everybody through not just the federal community, but basically our known list of people in all of the work program activities and the various POs that are engaged in the US-based POs that are engaged in GEO and affiliates, I should say as well, and invite them to this event because we do want input from the broader community and not just from the federal sector. So that is one of the main ways on an annual basis. I also think at the meetings themselves, several of us, some of us are going to the next GEO Symposium in September in China. We always try to hook up with whoever from the United States is going so that we are hearing as well from our US colleagues at these types of events as well. So I'm also happy to talk about that offline if you have a specific ask about how that works. But there are opportunities, and we do try to make sure that when we're considering the US position, we also take into account what we're hearing from the non-federal sector in the United States who are participating in GEO activities.
All right, I looked at my watch and I think we're at time. So I am going to officially call this session closed. Could we all thank our speakers one more time? And thanks again for all of you for being here, for your good questions, for your engagement. Go forth and enjoy Asheville.